Everyone. My name is Daniela Labate Cavelli. I'm from NIAPers. Thanks for joining us today on our third webinar this month, Leading for Change, Creative and Nimble Leadership. So before we get started, like I said, we do have some housekeeping. If you're new to NIAPers, which I hope we might have some new folks still joining us, because we do see folks from pretty much all over, even Georgia and California. We are really a change agent, and our work is dedicated to improving services, public policies, and social conditions for people with mental health, substance use, and trauma-related challenges. And we do this by promoting health, wellness, and recovery, and full community inclusion. And our goal really is to help everyone achieve their maximum potential in the communities that they choose. So today's webinar is being recorded. You'll be able to find the recording and the PowerPoint posted on our website at www.niapers.org, and I'll put that in the chat box as well. We are providing CEUs for today's webinar. We're providing CEUs for LMSW, LCSW, CPRP, and LMHCs. And in order for you to receive CEUs, you must do a couple of things for us. The first is be in the virtual room and not on the telephone. We will not be able to provide anyone who's only using the phone and not in the room, whether it's on your app or your smartphone, your laptop, your iPad. You've got to be in the virtual room. And the other thing we ask is that within 24 hours of today's webinar, you'll receive a course evaluation, and that evaluation will be sent to the email address that you used to register for today's event. Everyone will be receiving that evaluation, and we do ask that everyone return that evaluation because we always want to get your feedback and see how we can improve things. If you would like to receive CEUs, however, you must return that evaluation within 48 hours or we will not be able to provide you with CEUs. We literally have thousands and thousands of folks that we're giving CEUs to, and we just need to be able to keep up. So we ask that you return your evaluation form within 48 hours. And of course, we do have a large number of folks on the line today, so we ask that you keep your phones muted and your cameras off. It shouldn't be an issue in this platform, but just in case something goes awry, we just ask that you do that. A couple of just quick slides around other NIAPers offerings. Start your workday mindfully with Ruth Cologne Wagner. Every day we have a 5-minute mindful meditation retreat that you can find on our website. And the Strive for 5 challenge is something that we've started back with the coalition back at the beginning of the pandemic. So you can take a look at this slide. It's really about helping to support others who might need a little extra support at this time. Okay, also, we want to make this pretty interactive and fun, and we want to communicate with each other. So you guys are doing a really good job of using the chat box now, which we appreciate. We hope that won't stop. We'll all be sort of monitoring the chat box throughout the webinar today. We also have a question or two that we ask that you'll use the chat box to enter your answers into so we can communicate with you. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the chat box. So I'm going to actually introduce Edie Schwartz. She's going to give us a presentation on leadership, and then she's going to lead our panel discussion. And we're happy to have with us 3 CEOs from various regions throughout the state. We've got Ashley Brody, Kirsten Vincent, and Jeff McQueen, and Edie will give you a little bit about them in a minute, but I'm gonna introduce you, Edie. So Edie Schwartz is a consultant with NIAPers. She's got over 40 years of experience in the field of managing and leading recovery-oriented services. Edie has shared her expertise with the next generation of healthcare practitioners by teaching courses at both Lehman College and Hunter School of Social Work on leadership and management, recovery-based mental health services, and psychiatric rehabilitation. In addition, she's written articles and presented at workshops and keynoted at various state, national, and international conferences. She's got a master's in social work from Hunter College and a doctorate in social work from City University of New York. And I am pleased to pass it over to you now, Edie.
Thank you. And with all that education and experience, I sent Daniela the wrong slide deck. So, what I'm going to do is let you read this a little bit as she's been chatting. But I'm going to ask Daniela when we get to the end to pull this back up, because what we're going to do is do a little bit of presentation, just 15 minutes about leadership and why I think it's so important for all of us. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open this up to these 3 seasoned, wonderful leaders who have been doing incredible work with their organizations, both before the pandemic and since, during and since. Well, I guess we're still during. And so we're going to have a discussion, and we're going to try to include you in the discussion. And I know that's hard because we currently have 546 of you on, but we're all going to be watching the chat box. And so we want you to be very talkative. And if we miss you, it's because it went so fast. And we're going to read that chat box after and answer questions and send them back. So I'm going to introduce our folks as it gets closer to the discussion we're going to have. And I'm going to begin now with this little short slide deck. So if you could go to the next slide, Daniela. Nope, the one before that. Is that okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. I just said we're going to have a little discussion, then we're going to ask you to give us some information, and then we're going to, enjoy a good conversation with Jeff, Ashley, and Kirsten. So we're going to define and discuss what leadership is. We're going to look at what you think the qualities of a great leader are and what we think the qualities of a great leader are. We're going to talk a little bit about something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's called principled leadership. And it comes from a book by one of my mentors, Bill Anthony from the Center for Psychiatric Rehabilitation, who recently passed away, but has added so immeasurably to the field of behavioral health for everyone. And he wrote a book called Principled Leadership that really pulls out what's most important about that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then with our panel, we're going to explore challenges and solutions about reopening and redesigning, because this pandemic has been extremely challenging for being able to be an engaging, recovery-oriented service provider. But on the other hand, it's given us some food for thought about the way that people can access services. And those folks who are nimble and quick and creative and can pivot are going to come out of this in a better way, offering a better array of services to folks than they did going in. And we're going to really explore how and why to do that. Next, please, Daniela. While I am talking, write who you are, write thoughts you have. Say things about what we're saying. I'm going to try to pull them out. Daniela's watching. Everyone's watching. So keep that chat box moving, okay? So great leaders are not afraid to engage in continuous innovation and change. They opt for effectiveness over efficiency. They're constantly open to learning. They generate enthusiasm for their mission, and a big one, they empower their staff to be good managers. This kind of says it all. I once worked for a man who said, you don't need a leader, because he was a kind of wimpy leader. He said, you don't need a leader, you just put a bunch of good people together in a room and you got good services. Well, I'm going to ask you guys, have you ever been in a place with a weak leader where a bunch of terrific people have been in the room and nothing happens that's good? Think about that, all you folks on there. Absolutely. I see it. I see the answers. Yes, yes, absolutely. Oh, yes. And that's because leaders are important, but they're not important to be efficiency members and to be, people who do all the paperwork and watch everything and hit you over the head all the time. That's not what they're there. They're there for this reason. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Next, Daniela. So this is a little slide about what we think leadership is. And what it is, you see that first one? The way that someone will influences staff to willingly engage in change, to engage willingly in behaviors that contribute to attaining organizational goals. It's someone who creates an environment that allows people to feel empowered and to feel a part of something, rather than just something that they have to do to collect a paycheck. And the key ingredient is good organization. And I've said this in many times in many different webinars. It's not a science, leadership, and it's not an art. It's both. It's not something, you know how they say leaders are born or leaders are learned. You know, there's certain things about leadership that you're born into, but you know, I began my life as a real academic. I was getting a PhD in anthropology. I had no desire at all to work in behavioral health or to work in human services. That wasn't where I was going. And I was shy and a really quiet kid, kind of quiet, depressed kid, which may be TMI for all 500 and something of you. But I was someone who was not a born leader. But I learned, actually through music, I learned how to use myself to be able to affect change. So it's an art and a science. And good leaders bring both of those things to the forefront. And if there's not a good leader, because you saw that already, I asked you that already. If there's not a good leader, then services really do suffer. Someone wrote they agree. Someone wrote that a leader should be amenable and flexible, and absolutely. Next slide. So these are the things that we see a good leader is. It's someone, again, you know, this is how you create an atmosphere that empowers people. You have this clear vision of the role and the strengths of the organization, also the challenges. And you understand and you remain passionate about mission. You know, there are all kinds of information about mission drift and following the money instead of the mission. It's very, you know, Daniela didn't mention, before joining NIAPRA is my most recent gig for the last 10 years before I became a private consultant. I was the founding CEO of a community behavioral health organization in Putnam County. And I needed to understand the challenges that I was walking into, not just the strengths, but the challenges. And to keep that mission extremely in the forefront. And those are things that are challenges for CEOs. It's a hard job, no matter how big your organization is. And vision and mission is always important. Weak leadership leads to more staff turnover, absolutely. So a good leader understands that and is committed to quality services. You know, when you're a leader, there are things you have to do that you might not have thought that you had to do. But what you have to do is keep your eye on the brass ring. You have to always have a place where you know what you're there for. You can never forget the outcome of your work. And the outcome of your work in our field is a human being getting their life back. That's what it is. Forget all the big words of that data collection and HEDIS measures, and all of those things are true. All those medical HEDIS measures, they're all true. But what happens when you reduce hospitalizations? What happens when you reduce use of ER? What happens is there's a human being in there who's doing something else meaningful with their life besides those things. And that's the brass ring. So we stay committed to being quality and reaching those outcomes. And a good leader is skilled at making sure you become passionate about what that leader is passionate about. And there's a great comment here from Andy. You have to see the forest through the trees. And you do. And let me tell you, you have to be organizationally savvy. You have to be detail oriented. You have to see every tree. But you have to look past the trees to the forest. You're 100% right. Next slide. These comments are great. Keep them up. So now I need all my panelists to help me, because I want you to write in what makes a good leader. Okay? You're all terrific and you're all writing the best stuff. So get your fingers on that keyboard. All right. Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh my goodness, I can't even read them. Transparency, empathy, accountability, listening and compassion, trust, honesty, empathic. Oh, it's going so fast I can't even read it. Humility.
I see integrity as well, and respect and supportive, accountability, advocacy,
Trust.
knowledge and understanding.
Being able to think outside the box. You know, some people are writing longer things that I really want to read, but it's going so fast I can't. So we'll pull some of them up afterwards. Good listening, absolutely. You know, it's amazing. You know, I am a clinical social worker as well as a manager, and it's amazing how we are not taught in school how to listen. How many therapists have we all gone to who just don't seem to listen to what we're saying? So it's the same thing. If you can't listen, you can't be a good manager, a good leader.
True.
Humor, engaging, open to listening, authentic, humility. You bet. You know, there but for the grace of God for every single person. Don't ever, ever ask somebody to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. That's kind of, you may not know how to do something, you know, but don't be asking somebody to do something that you're not there. Humor, you bet. How do you get through life? Doesn't micromanage, knowledgeable. They learned it in the Army. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Listens and asks for ideas, encourages others to get involved. Humility, passionate, ask questions, yes. You know, that's the other thing. People are afraid to bring people around them as leaders. We're afraid sometimes to have a diverse team. Let me tell you, I learned something when I was in social work school. And this teacher, who was a rather strange man, but he was brilliant. And he said, always hire people who are different from you, who think differently from you. Because you don't need a clone of you. You've got that idea. So you don't have to go with all of these ideas. You know, you're the one makes the final decision. But having all that input of people who think differently than you think really makes for a very strong outcome, right? Right, everybody? Empower others, invite their ideas. Yep. Yep. Okay, I'm going to move on because I want to make sure there's time for the conversation. These are great. And while I'm doing that, if any of you guys want to scroll up and get some of those longer ones and interrupt me and dive in, that'd be great. Daniela, next. So here's some things that make you want to follow someone. And while I'm doing think about, like I told you, that Bill Anthony was one of my mentors. I would follow that person to the ends of the earth. He is someone who inspires such incredible passion in others, and such, if you don't know anything he's done, take a look at William Anthony and any of his articles, and any of the folks who work in the Center for Psychiatric Rehabilitation. So what makes you want to follow someone? You want to follow someone who cares about something, who's emotional and expressive. You want to follow someone who adapts to new situations, who doesn't always stay in the same spot. If you throw something at him or her, they're actually going to think about it and move forward. Because you know what? Even when there's not a pandemic, everything changes all the time. Life is just not the same. And that's what makes it wonderful. That's what's so interesting about human beings, is that we get to change all the time. You know, I always say, you know, when my friends had kids who were growing up and they dyed their hair purple or green, or so what, it's hair. It's fun. It grows out. It changes. It's things to do differently. Leaders take ideas and they make them into reality. You ever known anybody who's all full of good ideas, but nothing ever really happens? It's great to be full of good ideas, but you also have to be able to move those ideas into operation. If you are not an operations person, just an idea person, that's okay. Hire an operations person. Because there are people who are operations people, but not idea people. Hire someone, work like this, so that that person can make your ideas happen. Leaders inspire others. They stick to it, and they have energy, and they're creative. They don't give up when the going gets tough. Leaders instill confidence. And one of the ways they instill confidence, and this is something that people don't realize, they instill confidence by developing rules. You know, I did 2 transformations in my life to recovery-oriented services. The first one failed because I didn't understand I needed to embed it in the fabric of the system through policies and procedures that brought order. And so when I left, it simply rode on my personality, which you can tell already I'm a little on the assertive side. So when I left, it collapsed on itself. The second one was 23 years ago, and it's still going strong because I embedded it in policies and procedures. When I was getting my doctorate, I did some interviewing of people, and they said to me, the thing that makes them not feel safe is when no one's in charge and there are no rules and regulations, because they don't know what to expect. So when you see no rules or regulations, that's not freedom. That's a sign of a weak leader, not a strong leader. So it's an interesting concept. Think about it. Okay, next slide. So we've really talked about a lot of these, and they're there just for you to look at. These slides will be available on the NIOPRS website, and you can see them. But leadership takes a lot of skill. Whether you learn it or you're born with it, you got to have it in order to really move forward. And these are the things. Develop vision and mission. You have to solve problems or be able to get a group of people together to help you solve problems. You know, the buck stops with you. People look to you to make a decision when you're a leader. You have to be creative. You have to identify opportunities to implement the changes you've made. You need to be aware of risks. You know, there are risks around every corner. You need to not be afraid of them, but you need to be aware of them, analyze them. Someone just wrote, take responsibility. Yes. You know, when your staff does something really good, they're responsible. It's their thing. They did it. When they do something really bad, you did it. And you're the person responsible. That's just the way it goes. The other thing is develop consensus. Bring all those diverse people around, listen, be clear, and develop consensus to move forward. Mobilize the financial and other resources you need. Don't leave people hanging without the ability to move forward and get what they need with money. That's our job as a leader. It's great to have great ideas, but they cost money. They need resources. What we just saw recently with PPE, it's a perfect example. If we needed to open, we needed to get our staff and clients safe. We need to have participants and staff safe. We needed to get what they needed. And keep going when there's a challenge, when, you know, when somebody puts a hurdle up, when someone puts a boundary up, break it down. You know, I used to say, I have so many people on, I don't know who's going to hear me. However, learn every single rule that's out there that affects your services so you can get around them. And that doesn't mean not to do them. It means to be creative in getting to where you need to go. I used to say to attorneys sometimes, this is what I really want. Is there a legal way to get there? And that's really about being persistent in challenges. And make sure, this last one could be the most important. Don't do it alone. Leadership is not about being alone. Information is only power if you share it. And you're only as strong as the team you develop to help you move forward. Everyone needs a buddy, including a leader. And this, I'm just going to wrap up with the principled leadership. If you look at this, you'll see that, and I bet a bunch of you are leaders on this a bunch of this 508 folks are leaders now, which is why you're here. Don't get lost in how much responsibility you have. Remember your shared vision. Remember the brass ring. Remember the human being who has an opportunity to get their life back because of your leadership. Make sure you centralize by mission and decentralize by operations. You know what that means? It means everyone's clear about the mission and vision of your organization or your division, and then get out of the way. Because everything's different and should be about what's needed in that particular community with that particular group of people. Even to the effect of something like Ashley just wrote something to me, and it's even to someone like who provides housing and has housing all over like Ashley does. I bet when we get further and he talks, every one of his houses, every one of his apartments does not function exactly the same way because they're decentralized by operations, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. The third one, create an organizational culture that identifies and tries to live by key values. You have values, vision, and mission, and everyone needs to know them. Plaster them on the wall. Put them on your welcome sign. Make sure everyone's clear about them and live by them. If your values are about recovery and and caring and being good, then your organization should function that way. You should be treating your staff that way. You should be dealing with things the way that your vision and mission is stated. Make sure that your staff feel empowered. We talked about that. And, see this, ensure that staff are trained in how to translate vision into reality. I wish I began my recovery journeys on my practice in the mid 80s. And I wish everyone functioned that way. They just don't. They still don't all these years later. It's better than it used to be, but they still don't. That's the reality. And so when I hired people, I didn't always look that they were recovery oriented in their practice. I looked that they were flexible and open to accepting that way of practicing. So you make sure it's our responsibility to train the people who are with us and coming in on the way that we want services to be delivered. You can't expect that they're going to get it by osmosis. And someone wrote, you can train everything but passion. And you're right. So I recently did some stuff for McTack. It's on their website. They're in the middle of an HR series right now. It's real good. But one of the things is about what questions to ask when you hire people, what to look for if you want a recovery-oriented system of services. And passion is what you want to see. It just might be channeled in the wrong direction because in school, they're still not teaching us how to do this in a recovery-oriented fashion or sufficiently. But if the passion's there, you could teach the skill set. Relate constructively to people. Don't be mean. Don't allow meanness. Don't allow people to speak to each other disrespectfully. It's not okay. Don't speak to each other. Don't talk to one about the other. I know a leader whose staff always said to me, well, he talked about me to her and her to me. That feels lousy. Be constructive. Access and use info to make change a constant part of the organization because that's how you stay alive. And make sure, we're going to talk about this a little today, that we build the organization around our champions, our recovery champions, our exemplary performers. Next one. Someone was writing that micromanagement is the quickest way to kill someone's passion, and I agree with you. I agree with you. And you know how you get rid of micromanagement? I actually do executive coaching, and I just shared this with somebody who is talking about feeling terribly responsible and kind of not knowing what was going on. The way you get rid of micromanagement is you develop appropriate feedback loops so that you can know what's going on. And if you know what's going on, and I used to do it in supervision. That's how I did it. Keep me up to date on 3 things. What's going on, what's new, what's exciting, what's going to show up on the front page of the paper because it's going to kind of blow up in our face, and anything that you can't figure out that you're chewing on that you need some help thinking about. And then I always knew what was going on before it was a crisis. And then I didn't need to micromanage. So that's how you manage that kind of stuff. And just as we close up shop, before I introduce everyone, this top one is what I want to leave you with. Don't think that you can ever be totally in charge, because you can't. You can't figure out what's going to happen all the time. You are a part of the change. Be a part of the change. Be an active part of the change. That's Lulu, Daniela's dog. That's about, 10 pounds?
That was actually not Lulu today.
Oh.
Someone else's dog. For the record, my dog is in the backyard tanning.
Lulu thinks she's a great
That's
day.
my dog.
Oh, there you go. So these are just things to leave you with. I'm going to only talk about the last one. Be open to change. Be open to new ideas. Be open to change, because we're just a part of an evolving pattern of life. Next. Okay, can you go back to the intro?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit. I am going to close the chat box for a bit so I can move it over. I can, so I'll close it and come back to it. We are so lucky today to have this great crowd of folks with us listening, but also 3 of my favorite CEOs. And they are going to engage in some hard questions that we went over before, and also some of the questions that you're asking. So Ashley Brody, on top of our Hollywood Squares, is the CEO of Search for Change. And Search for Change is a nonprofit organization near where I live in the Hudson Valley. And I've actually known Search for Change for almost since its inception.
Sure.
And it began as a housing organization and really has moved into a vocational rehabilitation, supportive residential, educational, all of the things that folks with behavioral health challenges need to be able to live independently and be an active part of their community. And they provide services now throughout Westchester and Putnam counties, and also have relationships with other folks, so they provide services as well. Ashley provides oversight of the organization's daily operations, supports strategic initiatives. When I first met Ashley, he came into Search for Change, Ashley, over 25 years ago as a counselor in one of the services, and so the residential services. So talk about knowing every job in the organization. That's what we have with Ashley.
I started right out of elementary school. I was a prodigy.
And I was right there too. I was just a child. Right down below me is Jeff McQueen. Jeff is the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association of Nassau County. And Jeff is also a former stockbroker, and probably has less to play with since he moved over into human services. But he currently is a CEO of an investment firm as well, for the piddly little salaries that we all get now that he's given himself over to behavioral health. Jeff is also a combat veteran, and prior to his journey in recovery, Jeff experienced several hospitalizations, battling mental health challenges, PTSD, and substance use. So Jeff has done the work the hard way on himself, and he has presented since then implementation techniques throughout the country on topics such as personal growth and change, time management, and recovery-based modalities. And I've known Jeff a long time, and he's an incredible human being who's worked through his own adversities and obstacles throughout his recovery process and embrace those experiences and not only use them for his own recovery, but readily shares them to educate society and to help others empower themselves. Jeff holds an MBA and is a licensed chemical dependency counselor. And our third person right below Jeff is Kirsten Vincent. I know Kirsten, I think the shortest, but I have been incredibly impressed with the work that she's been doing. She has worked in the human services field for over 26 years, also starting as a child, and started her career with young children. She probably was in a group, and she was one of those young children, and and families. And then Kirsten discovered peer services and her own passion for supporting others through peer services. Kirsten was hired at Housing Options Made Easy to run some short-term crisis respite, and she's still with them now as the interim CEO, and has moved up then through the ranks as well at Housing Options Made Easy. Kirsten also is a trainer. She's done staff development training, community education, and she's a teacher. Kirsten believes in the strength of personal recovery and the resilience of others, and it's the foundation of her passion for peer services and the driving force behind all the work that she does. Kirsten has a PhD and is a licensed mental health counselor. So we have a great panel. Daniela, want to take the screen down and we'll go to just our faces, and I have the chat box back. And welcome to everybody, and I can't thank you enough for being part of our panel today. So we're going to start off with this question. Can you tell us a little about your organization and the changes you made when we all were isolated by COVID? So Ashley, you want to get started up there in the upper left?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. And thank you for everybody for this robust turnout. This is spectacular. So glad I have the opportunity to be here with you today. As Edie shared with you, my organization provides an array of services. It started as a supportive housing provider in the Hudson Valley region. We operate in Westchester and Putnam counties. And we provide supportive housing for adults with behavioral health challenges. Over the years, we have evolved like many organizations. We now provide vocational rehabilitation services, some care management services, educational support services. We are an HCBS provider like many, and trying to bring that service online in fits and starts like everybody. So we have grown and changed with the times. And that has required, I think, some careful and nimble leadership by my many predecessors. And I stand on the shoulders of giants. I've been fortunate to have some great mentors and predecessors who came before me and helped to bring the agency to where it is. So we, of course, have evolved in concert with changing times. That was true before COVID. It's been exceptionally true during COVID, as you all know and are experiencing in your own lives and organizations. I could certainly speak for hours about the changes that we've instituted in the time of COVID. We obviously don't have that amount of time, but I'll say that if there's one overarching theme that I could use to describe the changes that we've instituted in the time of COVID, it's really been something captured in one of the previous slides. It's about reinforcing the mission, but really decentralizing operations and also enhancing and facilitating communication, which is somewhat counterintuitive because if one thing COVID has done is separated us physically. We know that, you know, if we had a dime for every time we've heard the phrase social distancing, we can invest with Jeffrey in his private firm. But I think what we really tried to do is to replace that appellation social distancing with physical distancing, and it really tried to increase communications using the tools of the trade such as Zoom, and to do our best to empower people who might be working more remotely to nevertheless act as their own leaders of their own departments and their own divisions. As Edie shared with you at the outset, we operate a highly decentralized organization that has residences all over 2 counties, different offices, people working remotely. And in order for us to function effectively in this landscape, we have to empower people. And I think that we've tried to do our best to empower people to be their own leaders, working within organizations and working under the stewardship of our management team and board of directors. So as I was reviewing the slides in preparation for this, that is one of the principles that jumped out at me. There are many more, of course, But I think decentralizing our operations while ensuring that everybody has a clear and coherent sense of the mission is what's been most important. So I'll talk more about that, but that's a bit about my organization and background. And again, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So I'm busily writing in the chat. Thank you, Ashley. Jeff?
How you doing? So this is awesome, first of all. So it's always a pleasure to be a part of something like this and to be able to share this platform with such powerful leaders, and also just to be in a room with so many people who are leaders themselves, and even in the early forms of leadership and may not even be aware that they're on that journey, right? Because I think at some point I didn't know the end game would look like this. I don't even think I was looking for it. I just know I wanted to be a part of it. You know, I just wanted to be in the mission. But anyway, I'm the executive director with the Mental Health Association Nassau County, and we do have a variety of services. We began in advocacy, trying to support our community and make sure that people had the right to live in the community of their choice and had access to services without any discrepancy or bias in those services that were provided to them. And so we do that in a number of ways. We do have housing as well. We do all three levels from CR to supported. We also have housing for our homeless community and veterans and individuals dealing with substance use disorder. Care coordination, we are definitely with CMAs for the health home. We have an extremely large peer department. We run two peer respites, I should say. We were the first two downstate. I think we're the only two downstate. I think we just lost Edie. But we also have an extremely large peer department, HCBS services as well, Ashley, which is another conversation, right? That's a webinar on its own.
It is a series of them.
That's a webinar on its own. But we also, you know, in our advocacy, we support our community in a light that is different than most people would anticipate. And so we even do financial management, and that's so that we can make sure that individuals have access to be able to have some spending money, but know that their bills are getting paid and not worry about their inability to budget for the moment. But in lieu of that, we also do financial literacy courses because we want to teach them how to manage their money and to be smart about their dollars and how to make that money make sense for them. So we have care coordination, financial management, peer services. We have a pros program and a clinic. We also have a SOAR program, which is kind of like a pre-pros for individuals who want to have a specialized oriented recovery in the services. It's like an old clubhouse model, so to speak, that it just allows people to come and hang out and hang out with people like themselves and learn a few things about themselves and about life and new modalities of wellness, right? Give them the opportunity to latch on to some greater ideas that could help support them through the journey of their own life. And over all of this, we have a veterans department that provides all services to veterans for free. Naturally, I would have made sure that was happening because I'm a veteran. So I wanted to make sure, but I think it's bigger than that. I think it's more about veterans having put up so much of themselves to serve us that it's time for the community to serve them, right? And so there's a big gap in services for our veterans and coming home and not knowing what to do and where to go. And I just wanted to be a part of making sure that they know that there's always a home here, and the services and the support that you might need, regardless of discharge status, are available to you with the Mental Health Association. So I think the bigger changes, looking at COVID, I don't want to go into the long list. Naturally, it required day in and day out meetings with leadership teams and be able to relook at protocols and constantly be able to reevaluate ourselves and make sure that we were doing what was best for the people that we care for, right? But also being able to turn that inwardly and making sure that what we was doing showed that we cared for ourselves as well, right? Like we had to make sure, there's always been an underlying passion at the agency. We've always looked at one another as family. But I think a circumstance like this kind of makes you have to bring that to the forefront and show them that we are family and that I'm not looking for you to do things for the dollar. I'm looking for you to do things because it's what we do. It's how we care for people, but we can't do it without caring for ourselves. There's an airplane model that talks about put the mask on yourself before trying to help someone else. And so I wanted to make sure that staff knew that before we do anything else, here's the mask for all of us. Like, we need to have the oxygen first so that we're all safe and feel comfortable about the work that we're providing. Now, let's continue to do what we're all in the field for, because we know we're not here for money. So let's continue to do what we're in the field for and go love on our community and care for those people that we care for. And so I think the biggest most flexible thing that we had to do was to definitely allow people to freely care for the community that we serve, and know that they could do that, and that whatever adjustments we needed to make as an organization to keep them safe while they do it had to be implemented and put into place.
Thank you, Jeff. I don't know if anyone else, I think it was me. I was just kicked off the platform. But if everyone else went on smoothly while you were talking?
Yep.
Great, then I'm back, so that's great. So Kirsten, how about if you tell us a little bit about Housing Options Made Easy and what you've been up to there?
Sure. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it. This is such a great group and a great turnout, and such an important discussion. So Housing Options, much like everybody else, we obviously do housing. But what we had started talking about prior to COVID was that we needed to rebrand, because we do so much more than just housing now. That still is our biggest program. It's the foundation where we started. But now we also have our respites, we have our warm lines. We are an HCBS provider, and yes, we could have a whole day's webinar on just the challenges of being an HCBS provider. We have our recovery centers, and then we have a couple of other medically integrated programs. We have a CPEP diversion program, and we have a community reintegration team that works with people coming long stay out of Buffalo Psychiatric Center. But all of our programs, we're a peer-run agency. Obviously, all of our programs are designed to provide support to the community. And much like Jeff alluded to, we do this job because we want to support people and because we care about people. It is certainly not for the money. It is definitely the passion for our work that that defines why we come in every day. And someone in the chat earlier said you can't teach passion, and that's true. You can't teach it, but you can help instill it. A good leader can find a way to help develop passion in someone.
Yes.
It's not a black and white course that you put up on a chalkboard, but it's the actions that you do and how you carry yourself as a leader and how you care for your staff and your participants that helps instill that passion. And the list is long for all of the things that we had to do to kind of adjust for COVID, but it was a lot of planning on our part, making sure that we were able to provide services for our participants, being able to make sure that we were doing everything that we could for our staff. And we had programs that never closed because they're crisis programs. So we had staff who were in the field every day. We had staff that we had to transition to working from home. And there were a lot of challenges in making sure that both ends of that spectrum felt supported, because they needed very different things. And our concern was making sure that we were staying fluid with the situation so that we were daily addressing what needs there were and how we could just continue to make sure that everybody felt as supported as possible. And so as I started with this, we decided to go ahead with our rebrand because we wanted to let our staff know, as well as all of the people that we serve, that we're here for them on all levels. So we are now actually Recovery Options Made Easy. That's been official for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And that's
Wonderful.
because, we want all of our community, everybody that we touch, to know that no matter what their need is, we're going to be there to support them 100%. And I'm going to call out one of my staff members who threw up in the chat at the beginning of this. There's a quote on her direct supervisor's desk, which is actually a quote that I gave that person when I promoted them into management, that says, a true leader is not a seeker of consensus, but a molder of consensus, by Dr. King. And, you know, I want my staff to always know that it's not about just me asking, do you like what I'm doing? It's about developing a vision so people want to follow that vision every day.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Kirsten. That's great. I'm going to dive into some of these questions, and I don't know why. Seem to be, because it could happen. I seem to be having some issues on my computer. So if I fall out again, you guys all have the questions. Somebody else, bring them up, okay? So I'm going to jump into this question on communication, because we've talked about it, and there are some issues in the chat box on it too. So communication is even more important in times of crisis. Can you describe what you have in place with all levels of the organization to assure that managers, staff, and participants have all the info they need and continue to feel a part of decision-making as we begin to reimagine our services and service provision?
Sure.
Any of you want to chew on that?
I'll jump in on that, if that's okay. So I mentioned in my introduction that we recognize that if COVID necessitated one thing, it was improved communications. And communication is always imperative, whether we're in the midst of a pandemic or not. I think we probably would all agree on that. But we recognized the dictates of physical separation, social distancing, the need for us to migrate to remote work activity and telehealth physically separated us in ways that we had never experienced in my tenure in the agency, and I would venture never. You know, being apart from each other, physically apart, not being able to engage with each other in the way that we customarily had, to exchange ideas spontaneously the way we did when we were occupying the same spaces together, whether it's in the administrative offices or the residence programs, really proved to be a big obstacle for us. We are in an environment that is very information intensive, very collaborative in nature. We're all human service providers. We work together by design and by definition. So for us not to be able to do that in the way that we had been accustomed to for so many years was very difficult. And we're still wrestling with that. And I'm going to tell you, as I think any decent leader will tell you, we don't have all the answers, and we're still maybe figuring them out as we go and trying to figure out what works and adopt this attitude of continuous quality improvement. But a few things that we did right off the bat were establish regular, what we call office hours, that are Zoom sessions with all of our senior managers, with our middle managers, with our frontline supervisors, with others, through which we check in with each other on a regular basis, much more frequently actually than we did pre-COVID. We had a series of meetings that we would hold as part of our operating procedure, but we increased the frequency of those meetings and are holding them remotely, of course, by Zoom. So we have increased the frequency of those meetings. We've changed the format of them. We have obtained additional Zoom licenses from many of our staff so they could facilitate meetings with their teams. We've done a number of things to really try to facilitate communication throughout the agency using the tools of the trade to foster that connectivity and to replace what we've lost to the extent possible. You know, I don't think that Zoom replaces that in-person touch. We know that, but it's the best that we have in many instances, and we've leveraged it to the extent that we could. We've also increased email communications, good old-fashioned telephone communications, and we've encouraged our recipients to do the same and to support them in doing that, outfitting them with equipment as they need in order to connect with us, to connect with their treatment providers, to connect with their clinicians, their family members. So I think that we've done what we could to try to replace what's been lost using the tools and technologies available. That's something we move pretty quickly to do. And I'm not, again, going to tell you that it's been perfect or that it's a panacea for the separation that's associated with COVID, but it's one thing that I think has helped to at least forestall some of the lost communication that otherwise would have occurred.
Anyone else want to jump in on this one?
I just want to say we did similar things. Every team is having their own meetings, their own coffee hours. You know, I have meetings with all my directors, and some daily, but definitely all of them weekly. And I think that it is interesting that we have more team meetings and team discussions now than we did pre-COVID. I have thought about that. That is really interesting. That even though it's almost like we're trying to replace the physical distance with the Zoom meetings just to make sure that we're staying in as much contact as possible.
Mhm.
I think what we're identifying is that when you're down the hall or, you know, on another floor and you're in your office throughout the day, it wasn't a big deal for me to sit there and pick up the phone, dial your extension, or run downstairs and have a quick pop in and discussion with you. But now that's not the case. And so I think we make it up by having more meetings, right? Like we discovered that there is a greater need for us to have conversation with one another to be able to carry on our day-to-day tasks that we used to, because we don't have you down the hall. I'm not able to just pop in anymore. And so not only that, but I know that you're inundated with your own task and with your own team, things that you need to do. And so I'm trying not to call you as much or pop in as much, because now I don't really know your schedule the way I did when you were in the office. It was easier knowing, oh yeah, you're going to be out at 12 because you got that thing over at Hofstra, blah, blah, blah. But now it's a little different because what I've identified is that the meetings no longer have a commute time. You know, I'm not driving to the next meeting. I'm having a meeting at 10 to 11, and then the next meeting's from 11 to 12, and there's no downtime. So when I do have the downtime, I try to use it as wisely as possible, communicating with my team, sharing information with them, and being able to make sure that they know I'm available, just as available as I was when you were able to pop into my door. I have an open door policy, and that's never stopped. I believe in order for us to be able to make sure that things are clear and that directives are available to you, I have to make sure that my availability is easily accessible. So,
and I think another important piece of communication is about communication that extends beyond the bounds of the job, so to speak. And this speaks to a comment that was just inserted in the chat by one of our attendees. It's important for all of us, leaders especially, but for all of us to check in with each other about how we're doing. We're balancing so many competing demands right now. And those of you who have young children, and I imagine that includes many, who are in attendance, you suddenly were thrust into the role of becoming full-time school teachers, for many, in addition to being full-time employees and full-time X number of other things. This is an extraordinarily difficult time for so many, and maintaining that work-life balance to mitigate that compassion fatigue and all the stressors that are inherent in our work are probably harder now than ever. So I think it's just so essential for us to continue to check in with each other, to ask how we're doing, to be mindful of additional constraints. And to Jeff's point, we don't always know what each other's schedule is, because our schedules are subject to change at a moment's notice. If we're suddenly now at home with a child all the time, well, you know, the child doesn't always operate around our schedule, as we know. So we have to strike that balance between maintaining continuity, predictability in the workplace, having those rules and policies and procedures that help people to be safe, while at the same time maintaining and extending enough flexibility to acknowledge the constraints people are facing. It's a difficult balancing act, I think, for all of us. And I think we're continually refining that balance and knowing that whatever step we take, we might need to recalibrate. But being flexible is always important, I think, in this field. But I think it's paramount right now.
You know, I want to, because these things always don't have enough time, I want to get to asking 2 questions about the future. But before I do that, I want to ask an important question about mentorships. So I may not get to all of you. Maybe one of you or a couple of you might answer this one, and then we'll move to some of the unexpected things you found from the challenges and kind of a little bit about what you're visioning. But being a leader, to me, the most important part about being a leader was passing it on. That's why, as an old person, I'm still working. You know, it's like you gather a body of information and you want to mentor somebody else so that they don't have to struggle the way you did. Isn't that why we all go in this field, no matter what we do? So new patterns of behavior often are evident in a time of crisis. And sometimes new people step up as leaders who you might not have thought were in those positions before. So I'd like to know if you found this to be true, and has it been helpful? And what are you doing to nurture new emergent leaders?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would love that one. So definitely I've learned that I have some individuals here who are bringing their A game in this time of crisis, right? Like they've showed up and they have not missed a beat. They've been more than willing to go above and beyond their call of duty. And in me recognizing this, I've quickly made it so that I could pull them kind of under my wing and say, you know what, you're running with a lot, but I get that you want it. So let me give you some tips on what you can do to make this work for yourself. I don't want to stop you from doing it because I see where you are. But if I were you, I would also look at this and this. And so I begin to start developing extra supervision with them because, and I guess this is kind of a sidebar, but I think I need to say this, that supervision isn't about your tasks at the organization, right? It's not about how you're doing your job. It's about you and how do I help you enhance who you are on your job, right? So in doing so with my supervision with them, I've made sure that I've amped up a little sidebar that is strictly mentorship. You know, it's strictly about management and leadership because they're two different things, right? Like we lead people and we manage things. So in doing so, I want to make sure that they understand how to manage the things that they're wanting to take on and how to continue to keep the leadership roles open so that they're developing the leaders on their team to take extra roles as well. You know, I've always challenged my staff to come get my job, always. I've always told them, there's a CEO in you, please come get it. Come get this seat, please. And tell me what I can do to help you get it. Because the more leaders I have on board, the greater the organization is going to be and the better the outcomes of the community that we serve will be. So.
Jeff, I think everyone's moving to Nassau to come work for you. You should
Yeah.
go read the chat
Very well
box.
put. Indeed.
Does anyone else want to jump in before I jump into this next question? I don't want to cut you off. No.
That's fine.
I would just add very quickly that I think you'll know that you are leading correctly, if you will, or that you're doing something right when you have individuals who naturally gravitate to you and seek your mentorship. I think some of those relationships emerge organically as well, that sometimes you'll find yourself in a position where you are connecting with someone and they're connecting with you and they're finding something in you that they want to emulate or to which they aspire. So sometimes that happens organically. And if you find that happening, there's a sign that you're doing something good. But to Jeff's point too, it's also important for leaders to look out, and affirmatively identify those people who are bringing their A game, who have that interest, that desire, that motivation, because I believe anyone can become a leader. And I believe everyone is a leader in some domain of their life, and they might have untapped leadership potential. But mentorship plays a critical role, and I've seen it emerge in different ways. I've seen it emerge through an active selection process, and more often than not, even just organically.
Thank you. So, Kirsten.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that, or for my staff to know that it's my goal for them to eventually surpass me. I'm basically working myself out of a job, and if I'm doing a good job, at some point, I'm going to identify that person who's ready to take that step and, take over what I've been working on and what I've created and take it to the next level. That's my responsibility to my staff.
Yeah. So Kirsten, let me ask you this next question. And let's jump in on this one. Let's just vision for a minute, because visioning is very important in leadership. We all know that, and none of us ever have time for it. So let's take a second to do a little visioning. None of us know for sure, but let's take a stab at it and try to picture what your organization is going to look like as we emerge from this crisis, because we know you started it before in the rebranding. So how will we change and how will you become stronger?
Well, I think we've definitely taken a different look at how we're going to provide services. We've been able to become more flexible and to embrace the concepts of telehealth, telepeer services, utilizing virtual services. And, we've always said peer services about meeting people where they are. And now we do that in even different ways because we're taking our technology to them, something I don't know that I would have envisioned a couple of years ago, but certainly am looking at now. And about being even more approachable as an agency, letting people know that there's there's a lot of different ways that we can support you, not just in the traditional ways that we always have.
Yeah, that's great. Ashley, Jeff, what do you think? How will you change your organization? How will your organization become stronger?
I certainly would echo some of the sentiments that Kirsten shared. We've also have learned to question a lot of assumptions that we held, and I can go on a long list of them, but I'll say, for instance, we assumed right off the bat that some individuals we serve and some of our staff would be perhaps more destabilized or adversely affected by the pandemic than in fact they have. And that's another instance in which people have stepped up and have shown their leadership potential and have actually managed quite well. So I think through this process, we have learned and are continuing to learn that some of the deeply held assumptions that we had about what people need don't really hold. So it's allow us to recalibrate the way that we're delivering services and to adopt a more flexible approach. So I think as we return to some semblance of normalcy, when COVID finally wanes, before we return to our old way of doing business, if you will, even if that's an option, we are going to continue to reevaluate everything and look at new and potentially innovative ways of delivering services, of course, using these new tools such as telehealth and whatnot, but even questioning whether certain services that we had delivered are really wanted or needed or necessary. So many of us who operate in these organizations, as we know, get in the habit of delivering services because that's the way it's always been done, right? We do things because that's the way it's always been done. And I think all of us have fallen into that trap at times. I know I have. And it's easy. It's a path of least resistance. What this has taught us is flexibility, patience, more resilience, and to know that the path of least resistance is not always the path that one must follow. So I think we've already made some changes in the way we're delivering services, and I expect that's going to continue and will emerge from this more flexible, more nimble, perhaps not doing some things that we've been doing up until now, having when they're no longer necessary, but doing some things differently, but maintaining that flexibility that we need so we can adapt again when the circumstances call for it. Life is full of adaptation, as we know, and this crisis has taught us that sometimes you have to adapt quite quickly and quite dramatically. And I think we've done that to the extent possible, not perfectly, and we're learning from it, but we're still doing it.
So Jeff,
Yeah, go ahead.
let me ask you this last question, and you can dive in with your answer because they're kind of similar to both of them, which is, if there's a silver lining in this awful situation we find ourselves in, we in the nonprofit healthcare section are going to find it, because that's what we do. We go for that brass ring. Yeah. So we know that crisis times create unexpected opportunities. What are you finding that's surprising you? And again, join that with, how are you going to become stronger? What are you going to change? What surprised you, if anything?
Yeah, I think what surprised me is that for years I've been having a conversation with colleagues about we have to stop being competitive and be collaborative, right? Like that's been a conversation coming out my mouth for a very long time. Grants go up and people are just, everybody's, like crabs in a basket. Oh, it's got to be mine. I got to get it. But the truth of the matter is that I think that this modality weakens our system more than it strengthens it. And so what surprised me from this crisis is that people became collaborative and they stopped becoming competitive, right? We saw that there was a greater need for us to be able to work together, lean on each other, find out what one another's are doing, share policies and protocols and procedures. What are you guys doing over there? I remember early on, I partnered with probably 15 other organizations to make a huge purchase for masks, so we could get it at a lower cost and get it quickly. And so those type of things are the things that surprised me. But as far as us becoming better and emerging from this stronger, we already have. We already have. I think all of us were surprised at how quickly we were able to respond to this and how resilient we were able to be. Not only that, but even our local government surprised us in how quickly they changed their protocols and loosened the parameters of regulations to be able to make sure that companies would continue to be able to be flexible and provide care for the people that we have in our community.
Absolutely.
We needed it to be instant, and they made sure that it was. They practically said, you know what? do what you got to do. And they even almost let us write that, right? Like, what do your protocols look like? And then when they sent out their regulations and protocols, I was pretty much looking at what I wrote.
Perfect. So
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, we only have 2 minutes left. So I want to just give Ashley, and I feel like Judy Woodruff on the PBS NewsHour, in 1 minute each. What surprised you?
I think I already intimated this earlier, that some individuals who we serve through our programs have really managed this with extraordinary resilience. And I suppose that really shouldn't be shocking to me. It's not shocking. But I think what we learned is that individuals, we were reminded, I should say, it's not so much of a learning as a reminder of something we repeatedly overlook, that individuals are more resilient than we expect. And it was a potent reminder to us that many of the individuals entrusted to our care are quite resilient, if given the opportunity to be resilient. And in fact, this movement towards remote service delivery, towards telehealth, I'll call it a less intensive mode of service delivery, has actually been welcomed by many. And it's been very instructive to us, and it speaks to the point I made earlier about leading us to question some of the deeply held assumptions that we had, that a lot of things that we did because we thought were necessary, because we assumed were necessary, because they'd always been done a certain way, really don't need to be done that way necessarily. So we hope and trust that a lot of that will carry over. And as Jeff said too, we also were pleasantly surprised that our regulators, funders, exercised as much flexibility as they did. I think that there was, a general understanding that we needed to have a broad license to meet the needs of individuals under extraordinary conditions, and our supporters, sponsors, regulators were more flexible than we would have otherwise expected. So that was a pleasant surprise. But I think learning about how our clients were resilient and helping us to then adapt accordingly was very important.
Great. So Kirsten, the last word in the last minute. What surprised you?
I was pleasantly surprised that at the level of flexibility, both staff and our participants were able to achieve by working together. I was pleasantly surprised that our local governments reached out and asked us to become part of their planning for how to handle the crisis, and asked us to be involved in just maintaining services for the community, and really we're much more open to our involvement than sometimes they've been in the past. And I just was happy to see that. I agree with Jeff, collaboratively, this has been the bright side for me, that people were willing to put aside their fears, and a lot of trust was created and formed between agencies and even between staff and participants. So that was great.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I know we are over, but I had put in the chat box, I just want to say one more time, there's still over 500 people on here, even though we're over time. This is something that's really important to folks. And so Daniela and I and the team will talk about more. And the other thing I wanted to remind people was we have just completed our first 6-month Leadership Institute. There are only 12 people enrolled. It's small. I'm sorry it's not free, but it's not exorbitant either. And it includes coaching, webinars, groups. People, I'm just looking at the evals. People loved it. We're going to be starting another one in January for another 12 people. So keep your eyes on the e-news. And I think that leaders are not born. As we discussed, they're learned. All of us learned who are sitting on this panel. All of you are learning. So join us for our NIAPRIS Leadership Institute. And with that, I'm going to say, I love you guys. You are so brilliant. You're working so hard. I so appreciate everyone on the call and all of you on my panel for being willing to share of yourself so openly. And I turn it back over to Daniela.
Thank you, Edie, and thank all of you. Somebody actually wrote in the chat box, true leaders build more leaders. And I think that that is absolutely true of all of you on the screen today. So I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts, your wisdom, and really inspiring us today. I really appreciate it. So thanks to you, Ashley Brody, Jeff McQueen, Kirsten Vincent,
very much, everyone.
and of course our consultant forever, Edie Schwartz. Also, shameless plug before we hang up the phone. We have another webinar next Tuesday, the 25th, and that'll really be focused around human resources and returning back to work and sort of reopening up offices. So if you're interested in that, please go to www.niapers.org and register for that. And also, I want to say thank you to the woman behind the Niapers logo on the screen, Eileen Crosby-Negron, our office manager.
Absolutely.
If it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be on Zoom.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Eileen.
Or
Take care,
keeping,
everyone. Stay
keeping
safe.
ourselves together. Eileen
Yes.
is the best. Thank you.
Thank you.